We turn to you now to make a new start. More than just tears, we give you our hearts. Let the people cry and call, that we might stand and not fall. Save us.
Demonic wisdom, and we have a lot of that floating around. So I thought we'd just discuss it from the Bible point of view. One thing, though, we're kind of back into our house a little, almost all the way. The only thing we're kind of concerned about is our cat is kind of traumatized because she was upstairs all those years, and then we went down and lived in the basement while all the remodeling went on at our house, and she settled right in there, but now we come up, we got all wooden floors, and it was carpeting, and I just think she's distressed. But she's kind of that way anyway. She's a distressed cat anyway. And when she goes to the vet, as these guys know, you take her to the vet, and she gets these infusions and things, and just to keep her healthy because she's old. And her name's Sophie, and they call it the Sophie Spirit. She's just different. Our other cat passed away this last year, and so anyway, that's the thing. When I left, like, she's just yelling at me, unhappy. So I thought maybe let her go downstairs for a while and kind of soak that in and bring her back up. But that's about the only news we had, is trying to deal with this cat this morning and get here and get here and talk about some wisdom. I guess I need some wisdom from God on what to do with this cat and the cat screams like a baby. You think it's a baby crying. That's how loud it is. And this is a cat that used to never make a sound for like 15 years, never came around me at all, and now it's screaming in the night, and you have to get up like a baby and feed it in the night, and I don't know what's happened. I guess just old age set in, but anyway, and some changes we've made. Well, I hope you're having a good day, better than having to deal with something like your cat waking you up at night and screaming. Hope you're dealing with something a little more important than that. And we're going to talk about wisdom today. So let's just get on it and talk about it a little bit, because the book of James has a lot to say about wisdom. And it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God. All right, let him ask God. And when you do that, though, if you lack it, and do it without finding fault, because, God gives it without finding fault. So when he gives you your wisdom, get ready for it. He's not trying to find fault and call you stupid or ignorant, but without finding fault, he generously gives you wisdom. But it does say that you need to, when you get it, you need to, by the way, these screens are down. Oh, they're back up. When you get it, though, you got to believe. You can't just all of a sudden doubt. It says, don't doubt. If you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Because anyone who doubts is like a ship on the sea, just tossed and turned and whipped around. And that person who doubts shouldn't expect to receive anything from God. So here it starts out, if you lack wisdom, ask God, who generously gives it. But if you falter in it and doubt in the midst of it, then you shouldn't expect to receive anything from God. Now, I like that word. I haven't really studied it like I should have, probably, because I made it real practical just so we could, just get on board with it. But I like it because it doesn't say if you doubt, then God's not going to give you any wisdom. If you doubt it, you're not going to receive it. Am I right about that? Yeah. That person who's doubting shouldn't expect to receive any kind of wisdom from God, because you're just doubting it and you're being tossed around. So God gives wisdom freely, I think, through the Word of God. But the thing I like about it, when we talk about God's wisdom and he gives it freely, God's wisdom is something you receive. It's a receiving part. It's not something that you're going to go out and then you're going to discover the wisdom, especially if you go out in the world or you go out and listen to the news or whatever. go online and you figure stuff out. Okay, that's all right, I guess, but you got to be careful with it, which we're going to learn a little bit about today. But when you do get it, then you got to believe that God knows what he's doing and accept it so you can receive God's wisdom and go forth and let it come to you. So let's back up with that. So wisdom, hi Darren, wisdom from God, which he gives generously, though, is not something you cook up. It's something you receive. It's wisdom from God. And so we're going to look at that a little bit, continue in the book of James. But God gives it generously, and now we need to understand what's the difference between godly wisdom and worldly wisdom, right? So I turned over here and realized that it starts off, the book of James starts off in chapter 1 with, about wisdom. But you get over to chapter 3, then it begins to tell you, behold it here, there's two kinds of wisdom. There's two kinds. And no surprise there, right? So I was just reading it a few minutes ago, so I just opened my Bible here. You can join with me, but there's so much here. When it says, who is wise and understanding among you, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom, But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Deny the truth that maybe you say, well, I don't have that, when you do have it. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly. Now get this. Listen to the description of it. Earthly, right? Unscriptural, unspiritual, and demonic. Demonic. Whoa. Unspiritual, earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Whoa. Demonic wisdom. For wherever you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. Now, I think this is pretty important for us to get, because I was sharing the other day about the love of money, and the love of money brings every kind of evil thing, everything in, it just draws that evil. And we got to be careful, because we're kind of a money-loving culture, which people don't kind of deny that, but that's the truth. And so there you have every evil practice. Well, here it's saying the same thing, though. There you find disorder, where you find selfish ambition. Imagine that. How much selfish ambition do you think is in our country, in our lives, in our relationships, and in the churches, in the ministry, in the pulpits, right, in the pews, right? This selfish ambition. Well, when you find that, then you're going to find disorder and every evil practice. So here's the deal. If you're trying to move ahead with God, trying to get closer to God, and hear wisdom from God, then you can't expect it if you have selfish ambition and that, because that brings evil practice. And so that means you're trying to get ahead financially. You're trying to get ahead, or you got a better relationship in marriage or kids or at work or with your friends or whatever. And, it goes so good, and then trouble comes, or trouble comes in the marriage, or all of a sudden your kids turn rebellious. They don't want to have anything to do with you. They have no respect for you. And all that's going, well, see, that's evil practice that you may not realize that you've opened the door to it, and now you're seeing it in other people, in your finances, in your own heart, in your relationships like that. So godly wisdom is pretty important. God gives it generously, and we need to be able to compare what it is. So it's interesting when it talks about worldly wisdom, two kinds, that it doesn't describe it outwardly as much as it describes it inwardly. All of a sudden he begins to talk about bitter envy and selfish ambition, and that doesn't come from God, so it opens up evil practice. Well, let's go on to the next one and get out of that for a second. I just thought it was so interesting of what we're seeing in our world today. There's so much disorder in our country. Isn't there? Do you feel disorder everywhere? Arguing, fighting, trouble, everywhere, and in our country. And it's just, there's so much disorder, and God's kingdom has order in it, to it. And so we can't really trust what everybody's saying and the so-called wisdom that is worldly wisdom, because all these evil practices, all this disorder shows us that something's off here. Something's off. If it's just causing disorder all the time, and anger, and dishonor, and fighting, and all these things, then we understand that there's something off. And so then when somebody tries to give you wisdom that's involved in that, you can't really receive it or believe it, because the first, if it's godly wisdom, the first thing they're going to do is bring order. Okay, bring order and get everything settled down and help us bring order. All right. Well, let's get on to the other. But the wisdom that comes from heaven. That comes from heaven. So this is not something you drum up yourself or get online. This is something that comes from heaven. Is first of all pure. That's important. Peace-loving. See, so look at the difference between peace-loving and then the disorder we have in our country. Considerate. Submissive. I like that one, submissive, because you see people, maybe they do get wisdom from God. At least they think they have wisdom from God, and they get so haughty about it that you get God's wisdom. You still need to be submissive to each other, and not all of a sudden, I got the wisdom of God. I know what God. The old thing I heard so many people over the years say, God told me. Well, God told me. I don't know where these people come, where they have God telling them something all day long. But have you ever met that? Like all day long, God's telling them stuff. God, and they use the phrase, God told me, God told me. But anyway, it's submissive, full of mercy and good fruit. So godly wisdom is going to produce good fruit. Impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So let's just get it that we want to look at the symptoms of our lives, our relationship, our churches, and realize this is talking about things. And then when we see the symptoms of selfish ambition or bitterness or disorder, division, we can add our words to that. Then we got to check out our wisdom a little bit, right? We got to check out our wisdom. Is it really the wisdom of God that's being preached from the pulpit or being taught in a Sunday school class or whatever? And then we go out and we find out that we got all this disorder going on in our lives, but it's certainly in our country. So therefore, we want to ask God for wisdom and then recognize his wisdom is going to be pure and submissive and considerate and full of mercy and good fruit, right? And it's not pushy, right? No. That's what I said a little bit ago. God gives wisdom generously without finding fault. That's really important. Because a lot of times we need wisdom because we've done dumb things, right? That's why we need wisdom, but he's not going to be a fault finder. He's just going to be generous and give you that wisdom so that you can continue to walk with him and be, led by God in that, all right? So let's talk a little about this. That's one of the Old Testament scriptures that you probably know this, but the fear of the Lord is just the beginning of wisdom. I put just in there, but the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I don't think we have a lot of fear of the Lord today. People are pretty outspoken and pretty haughty and pretty prideful what they do, but the fear of the Lord. And so, I don't know how, when I grew up in the Methodist church, they were so concerned that we would, as a kid even, we would relate fear to like terror. Like said, well, they would make sure that we just tell us, so that means reverential fear. Okay, I didn't know what reverential meant when I was a kid, but whatever. And now I realize it's more than that, though. It's more just, the fear of the Lord is more just having reverence, because to them, the church I went to, reverence was sitting quiet in church. They wanted me to go to church and be reverent. That means I didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. And you just sat pretty much the whole time other than singing a few songs. Okay, so the fear of the Lord. I like to put it this way. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So how do you develop and start in that beginning of the fear of the Lord? It's got to be carefulness. It's being super careful with what you think, because you're in a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, so what you think, and even more careful to what you say, what comes out of your mouth, right? You've got to understand how powerful these words are. You can create a brokenhearted kid by your words. And if you think about it, what's happened to you during your life, there may have been some trouble come, or maybe something bad did happen to you. But really, as you look back on your life, you feel the oppression sometimes of life because of the way you were treated and how you were spoken to, the way your parents, the way teachers spoke to you. So words are powerful, and they create people. You know, they create things in people, resentment. You know, a normal kid, but then he hears terrible things said about him or mistreatment or whatever, then he gets resentment. Or when they get overlooked and they have the attention or love that a kid should have, then they might get resentful or rebellious or whatever. And by the way, I should write about this soon again, but a lot of parents, maybe you're one of them, have dealt with their kids being rebellious. And that doesn't mean that they can't have any ideas of their own, but there's just a difference. You know when you see rebellious. Maybe you were rebellious too. And so parents don't know how to deal with rebellion, especially church kids that go to church and they start showing rebellion. And so what most parents do, been doing this a long time, what most parents do is they pull back. And they kind of ignore it, and they pull back and give and leave the kid more alone because they don't want to cause them to be rebellious, so they pull back. So rebellious doesn't start and doesn't happen because of lack of attention, all right? It begins when they don't get what they need, and we think, well, if we pull back, they won't be rebellious. Well, that's what caused it in the first place. You know, no kid is going to hate being loved too much, right? And so what happens is neglect then produces rebellion, neglect. And parents go the opposite way. They pull back and give less attention, thinking, well, I don't want the kid to be rebellious, and so I'll just kind of pull back and let them do their own thing. Well, it's neglect produces rebellion, and it gets worse then, because all of a sudden then, as I told this example before, when they get to be like 16 years old or whatever, now they want to learn to drive, and now they want to drive, and now you've neglected them. You let the internet raise them, basically. You let them watch whatever, and they're just on phone all the time watching something, or television or whatever, and all these things. And they were neglected. You let the TV and internet and all that just kind of raise your kids. Well, then they turn 16 and get car keys, and all of a sudden now you get worried. You don't want them to go out and go to parties or get drunk and drive and drugs and sex and all that kind of. So now then the parent steps in, and as they hand them the car keys, now they're giving them all these instructions, all this attention, all this concern. And it triggers that rebellion, because you're like, well, where were you when I was 11? Where were you when I was 12 and I was just sitting there just staring at my phone and that. So the way to do it is you raise them the way they should go, and you stick with them and stay involved all the time from when they're little on up. Then when they turn 16 or whatever situation it is, and you come and you hand them the car keys and you give them the parental speech and carefulness and all that. Well, now they're not going to go into rebellion, because that's the way they've lived with you the whole time, right? Because your concern and your involvement has been through their whole life. So now they've got a car, they're going to go drive the car. Well, all right, you're going to get it, and you're going to stay involved. Stay involved. So it's just the pattern you had with them their whole lives. So the thing, like I said, neglect produces rebellion, and then when you try to come in when they get older to protect them from something, because there's a lot more things they could get involved in, now they're going like, hey, where'd you come from? Where were you before in my life? Now you want to dictate. Now that there's a car, now that I got a boyfriend, now I got a girlfriend. Oh, now you're all concerned about me. Where were you before? So that's just a hint about how to raise kids and get that rebellion. But anyway, the beginning of wisdom, all right? So the fear of the Lord, having reverence for God, but this carefulness about how you live. Careful what comes out of your mouth. See, what comes out of your mouth. We got to be people of integrity. We got to keep our word. So because we need to keep our word, God keeps his word. We need to keep our word. So we can't just be frivolous in our speech. We can't be tearing down. We can't, speaking bitterness. We can't speak bitterness. That's earthly wisdom and demonic wisdom. So we can't be that. And selfish ambition, all these things. So watch your words. Be careful. Protect your heart. Protect your eyes. Protect others through your words, right? Now, that's starting to be careful with God and reverence God and the fear of the Lord. So I know God's listening. God hears. God's with me. God knows. So I'm going to be careful what I think. I'm going to be careful, especially what I say. And now you're starting to enter into the beginning of wisdom. And when you get that beginning of wisdom, why is that so important? You get God's wisdom going in your life, you're going to have a good life. If you believe it and follow it, you're going to have a good life. Things are going to get cleaned up in relationships. It's going to get cleaned up in your finances. You'll get wisdom from God how to handle things financially. You'll get how to handle marriage troubles or marriage tension. You'll get wisdom from God, how to raise your children. I just gave you some wisdom. Could be from wisdom from God on rebellion. That could be just God's wisdom, isn't it? How to raise kids from the beginning. It's like God is with us, just involvement from the beginning. When you get saved, you get born again, God gets involved, right? Right from the beginning. And so he sticks with us all the way through. And then as a parent, involvement, or as a husband or as a wife to each other, involvement in the house, especially men, involvement in the house, involvement in the finances, involvement in making sure the bills are paid, just involvement. Because then when you want to give wisdom or you want to guide their lives, you're not stepping in from like you're some stranger that they don't know. And now you want to tell me what to do? Doesn't work. So involvement is the key, and that's wisdom right there. So godly wisdom is first, it's pure, it's peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. So this godly wisdom, there's two kinds, and I believe in our country, we've got to be very, very careful right now. There is demonic wisdom spreading through our country and trying to take us other ways. So you've got to get godly wisdom. Ask for it. Don't doubt. Believe it. Get it in your heart. Act on it. And your life is going to be better and better and better than